It was a stormy night when my life took a turn I never saw coming. My name is Cassandra, and until that fateful moment, I thought I had everything under control. The glow of the fireplace cast dancing shadows on the living room walls, and the sound of raindrops pelting against the window was almost soothing. Almost. But nothing could calm the storm brewing inside the house. Inside me? 3 years ago, I married Timothy, a man who brought light into my otherwise quiet existence. But Timothy came with his own past, his own family. His son, Aiden, was 18 at the time, quiet, observant, and carrying the kind of sharp intellect that made you feel like he could read your thoughts before you even spoke them. He had his mother's piercing green eyes and Timothy's brooding charm. And from the very beginning, I could tell he resented me. "You're not her," he'd said once with a tone so sharp it could cut glass. Those 4 words haunted me, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I wasn't his mother, and I could never be. That night, Timothy was away on a business trip, a common occurrence that left me and Aiden alone in a house that felt far too big for just the two of us. I was in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner, when I heard footsteps descending the staircase. They were slow, deliberate, and somehow carried a weight that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Hey!" Aiden's voice broke the silence, startling me. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Do you need help with anything?" It was an unexpected offer, one that left me momentarily speechless. He'd never shown any interest in bridging the gap between us before. "Sure," I said cautiously, handing him a cutting board and a knife. "You can chop the vegetables." We worked in silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of the knife hitting the board filling the room. I glanced at him occasionally, trying to read his mood, but his face remained impassive. Finally, I decided to break the ice. "And with school?" He shrugged. "Fine. Any plans for college?" I pressed, desperate to keep the conversation going. He paused, the knife hovering midair, and looked at me. "Why do you care?" The question caught me off guard. "Because I want to know more about you," I said, honestly. "I want us to get along." He snorted, a sound that was half amusement, half disbelief. "Get along," he repeated, shaking his head. "You're not my mom, Cassandra. We don't have to get along." His words stung, but I forced a smile. "I know I'm not your mom, Aiden. I'm not trying to replace her. I want us to be okay." He didn't respond. Instead, he finished chopping the vegetables, placed the knife on the counter, and walked out of the kitchen without another word. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a shift in Aiden's behavior. He wasn't as cold as he used to be, but there was something else. A certain intensity in the way he looked at me, in the way he spoke. It was subtle at first, easy to dismiss as my imagination, but then little things began to stand out. One evening, I found a book on my desk in the study, a rare first edition of a novel I'd mentioned loving during one of our rare conversations. It wasn't signed or accompanied by a note, but I knew it was from him. Another time, he fixed the broken hinge on the kitchen cabinet without being asked. When I thanked him, he just shrugged and muttered, "It was nothing." It was everything. The night everything changed, I was sitting in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, trying to unwind after a long day. Aiden walked in, his expression unreadable, as always, and sat down across from me. For a moment, we just sat there in silence, the sound of the rain filling the space between us. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. I nodded. "Of course. Are you happy?" The question took me by surprise. "What do you mean?" "With my dad. With this life," he clarified. "Are you happy?" I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. I think so," I said carefully. "Why do you ask?" He looked away, his jaw tightening. "No reason, just curious." But it wasn't just curiosity. There was something else in his eyes, something I couldn't quite place. For the first time, I felt a flicker of unease. Over the following days, Aiden's behavior became more unpredictable. He started lingering in rooms longer than necessary, his eyes following me in a way that made me feel exposed. He'd find excuses to touch my hand or brush against my shoulder, small, seemingly innocent gestures that felt anything but. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into his actions, but deep down, I knew something had shifted. The tension between us was palpable, like a tightly wound coil ready to snap. And then one night, it did. That night, the rain lashed against the windows with an intensity that mirrored the turmoil brewing inside me. I was in the kitchen, tidying up after dinner, when I heard Aiden's footsteps behind me. I turned to find him standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on me with a look I couldn't decipher, half defiance, half vulnerability. Cassandra, he said, his voice lower than usual. We need to talk. I put down the dish I was holding, wiping my hands on the towel. Okay, I said cautiously. What's on your mind? He stepped into the room, his presence filling the space in a way that made it feel smaller. I've been thinking a lot, he began, his words deliberate, measured. About you, about us. Us? The word felt foreign, out of place. Aiden, what do you mean? Mm-mm. He took another step closer, his gaze unwavering. I mean that I've been trying to figure out how to deal with this thing between us. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Aiden, I said firmly, there is no thing between us. I'm your father's wife. It doesn't mean I don't feel what I feel, he shot back, his voice rising slightly. You're more than just my dad's wife, Cassandra. You're the only one who sees me. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Aiden, you're confused, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't. I'm not confused, he interrupted, stepping closer until we were only a few feet apart. I know exactly how I feel, and I think you feel it too. I took a step back, shaking my head. No, I said firmly. Whatever you think this is, it's not real. You're projecting, Aiden. You've been through a lot and stop treating me like a kid, he snapped, his voice echoing in the room. I'm not a child, Cassandra. I know what I want and I know you feel it too. Don't lie to me. His words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and for a moment, all I could do was stare at him, my mind racing. How had it come to this? How had I missed the signs, the red flags that had been there all along? Aiden? I said, my voice trembling. This has to stop. Whatever you're feeling, it's not okay. We can't. You're scared, he said, cutting me off again. You're scared because you feel it too, and you don't know what to do about it. I'm not scared, I said, though my voice betrayed me. I'm trying to protect this family, to protect you. This can't happen. His expression softened for a moment, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability behind the anger. I'm not trying to hurt you, he said quietly. I need you to know how I feel. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. Aiden, I hear you, but this isn't about how you feel. It's about what's right. And this, whatever you think this is, it's not right. It's not real. For a moment, he just stood there, his face a mixture of frustration and sadness. Then he turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word, leaving me alone with the sound of the rain and the weight of what had just happened. Over the next few days, I tried to put the conversation out of my mind, to convince myself that it was just a momentary lapse, a misunderstanding that would pass. But Aiden didn't make it easy. His behavior became more intense, more deliberate. He found reasons to be near me, to touch my hand or my shoulder, to look at me in ways that made my skin crawl. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. Talking to Timothy felt like a betrayal, but keeping it to myself felt like a ticking time bomb. I was trapped, caught between my loyalty to my husband and my growing fear of what Aiden might do next. And then one night, everything came to a head. It was another stormy night. the kind where the world outside felt as chaotic as my thoughts. Timothy was due back the next morning, and I was counting down the hours until his return. I needed his presence, his stability to ground me. But the universe seemed determined to test me one final time. I was in the living room, the soft hum of the television filling the silence when Aiden appeared in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a storm of their own. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. I stood, my heart pounding. "Aiden, this has to stop. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, it has to end now." He stepped closer, shaking his head. "You don't understand. I can't just shut it off. I've tried, but it's impossible. I No," I interrupted, my voice shaking. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to disrupt this family because of some misplaced feelings. I am your stepmother, Aiden. Nothing more." Ah, he froze, the weight of my words hanging between us. For a moment, I thought I had finally reached him, that he understood. But then his face twisted into something I didn't recognize, a mixture of anger and desperation. "You think you're so perfect," he spat, "but you're not. You're just as broken as the rest of us." Before I could respond, he turned and stormed out of the room, leaving me shaken and unsure of what to do next. I thought it was over, that he would finally back down. I was wrong. Hours later, I was in my bedroom, trying to find solace in sleep when I heard a noise outside my door. I sat up, my pulse racing, and listened. The handle turned, and the door creaked open. "Aiden!" I called, my voice trembling. He stepped into the room, his face shadowed by the dim light from the hallway. "I need you to listen to me," he said, his tone low but urgent. "No, Aiden," I said, standing and backing away. "This has gone far enough. You need help. Someone who can guide you through whatever you're feeling. But it's not me." "You don't get it," he said, his voice breaking. "You're the only one who's ever seen me, who's ever cared. I can't let that go." "You're wrong," I said, my voice steadying. "Your father loves you. I love you, but not in the way you think. You need to talk to him. He'll understand." For a moment, he looked as though he might argue, but then something in his expression shifted. He stepped back, his shoulders slumping, and nodded. I don't want to lose him," he said quietly. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't, I promise, but you have to let this go." The next morning, Timothy returned home, and I knew it was time to confront the truth. I sat him down and told him everything, not just about Aiden's feelings, but about my own struggles to navigate my role in their family. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, but it was also the most necessary. To my relief, Timothy didn't react with anger or blame. Instead, he listened, his face etched with concern and sadness. When I finished, he took my hand and said, "We'll get through this together." Over the following weeks, we sought help for Aiden, a therapist who could help him understand and process his emotions. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was a step toward healing. Slowly, the tension in our home began to lift, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of peace. As for me, I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I made and to embrace the imperfect, messy reality of being part of a family. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. Sometimes storms come into our lives not to destroy, but to clear the way for something new. And as I stood by the window, watching the rain finally give way to sunlight, I realized that we were all a little stronger for having weathered it together.